when you're in the work and you're constantly thinking about where violence is clustering or this violent event, or listening to your teams be on the front line and like being in situations that are very dangerous, where they are the only folks that can kind of get in where no one else can, where they have that credibility, they have that rapport, but it's overwhelming, right? You're just very hyper-focused on the work itself.
From PHI Media, I'm Gordon Thane, and with me is someone who's put together a meticulous career in criminal justice and violence prevention that serves as an inspiration. Lori Toscano.
You're listening to the Public Health Insight Podcast, your go-to space for all things public health and global health, from the Sustainable Development Goals to the social determinants of health, as well as interesting dialogues about the diverse career opportunities that exist in these fields. Remember to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify so other people like you can benefit from our content.
At present day, Lori makes a meaningful impact as a Director of Justice Technical Assistance at WestEd, and is now a recognized national expert in community violence intervention. And that's something that we'll spend a little time exploring, but everybody has a story, and I'm deeply interested in exploring that. Why do people make the career decisions they make? What do they learn from their experiences? And especially, how they make an impact in community when sometimes it feels like our work is just a drop in the bucket. Lori, welcome to the Public Health Insight Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Gordon. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. And so, Lori, I like to start off this way. And it's because I like to visualize career journeys a bit like a Google map. Okay. And the reason I like it is because when you put in point A to point B, you have twists, turns, you got closures on the highway, you got traffic, you got detours. You never know what you're going to expect. So let's put your career path down as if it was a Google map and go back to the days of when you're in high school, making those critical choices about answering your parents about, hey, what do you want to be? You're having a lot of those discussions. And then you decide to enroll in the law enforcement program at Towson University. What was the thinking behind picking that specific program at the time?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. My entire life, all I wanted to be was a teacher. I mean,
a teacher?
Yeah, that's it. That was it. Fifth grade, because of the fifth grade teacher I had. Shout out to Mr. Brush. That's all I wanted to be, was a teacher. So I went to Towson, and at the time, this dates me, but at the time it was Towson State University. They were very well known for their education degree. So I was like, oh, this is perfect for me. I had taken a criminal justice class in high school. And
okay.
I thought it was really interesting. You know, it was an elective. I thought it was really cool.
So why did you just, I thought I'd take that as interesting?
I think I just thought I would take it because it was interesting. Yeah. Okay. I think, I can't remember, what the impetus for it was, like what I had to select between. But for whatever reason, that's what stuck out. Yeah. Yeah. And I was really interested in it. And I really enjoyed the class. But I went to Towson thinking I'm going to be a teacher. Hands down, no problem. Like that's.
And then did you have an idea of what you would teach at that point too, or just
fifth grade,
at that point?
Fifth, all I wanted was to be in elementary school.
Courses, subjects.
100%. I pictured myself like dressing up for like the history stuff,
Wow.
Yeah, I'm a huge reader. I love to read. So like how to make reading more engaging, which is what my fifth grade teacher did, right? So it was all these things that I had experienced and really loved that I thought, I'm going to learn how to do this. I'm going to put my spin on it. This is what I'm going to do for my career.
Okay, interesting.
And I don't know what happened, to be quite honest, because I switched freshman year. So I never even got like, oh, we're going to take these upper level classes that are like now towards teaching. Now something was like, I don't think that's it for me. And I think part of it was, when you think about individuals that have an elevated level of risk, right, whether that's risk for involvement in violence or risk for delinquency or whatever the case may be, those are the kids I really like, right? Like those are the kids I have a good time working with. Those are the kids that I feel like I can connect with for whatever reason. Yeah, and so something was just like, I think I'm interested in this. At Towson at the time, if I recall correctly, and dating myself, but I graduated in 1996, I think. Yes. it wasn't like a degree in criminal justice, how it is now. It was, the degree was a degree in law enforcement. No, a degree in interdisciplinary studies with a concentration in law enforcement.
Mouthful.
Yeah, very big mouthful. And at the time, too, I knew that I was not interested in going into law enforcement. I wasn't interested in that route. So at the time, it was, is it working for the Department of Juvenile Services? Is it working in a placement facility? I really didn't know. It was just that what we were learning was very interesting to me, and I was very, engaged with it. So I was like, let's see what happens with this, right? Let's do this and see where it goes.
So initially when you said teacher, I was like, oh, wow, that's very far off where you ended up. But when you broke it down with, you were like, I just want to invest in young people.
Yep.
Then I was able to then see the parallels between sort of going in criminal justice and the teaching. So I think there's some intertwined strings there.
Yeah.
So now when you finish your bachelor's, what was your first job after that?
Let's see, what was my first job after that? When I was at Towson, I did an internship with the Department of, I think at the time it was still referenced as the Department of Juvenile Justice. And the woman that I was shadowing, unfortunately, fell ill. And I ended up seeing all of her clients, all the kids that were on probation came to see me, or I went to see them, which was definitely very interesting. I can't recall if that was my first, if when I left, no, I think I worked at a juvenile facility for boys where they resided at the location.
Okay.
I think that there was a combination of youth that were referred through to the Department of Juvenile Justice, as well as youth that might have been under working with the Department of Social Services. Honestly, I was 18, I think. No, when I graduated, I was 21. So I was 21.
Right.
As I said, I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to graduate and I'm going to try to be a cop and, do all of that. So it was kind of like, what's out there, where.
So you're doing this and you still weren't sure how it would play out with what you just knew. You started from a place of interest.
Yep.
And weren't really quite sure how you would use and apply that knowledge and skill set. Interesting.
100%. Yeah. And it was kind of like, let's try some things out and see, where it takes me. Again, that was in the late 90s. So as my career advanced and I got more into community violence intervention, like that wasn't, folks were
that
doing
wasn't
that.
a
Like
crystal
obviously
ball
grassroots
master plan.
folks were doing it, right?
Yeah,
But like
yeah.
I wasn't connected to that at the time. So being 21, recent, grad, I didn't really know. And I don't have anyone in my life that is also in this space. Right. No one in my family is in does work in anything that's kind of like, my brother's a teacher, but like other than that, like, and then my friends were all doing different things, whether that was education or business or whatever. So it was kind of like,
you're a lone pilot there.
me out there being like, what does this look like for me? Yeah. And what makes the most sense? I think I've always had this, or maybe it's happened as I've gotten older, in this space specifically. And, when it comes to violence prevention and intervention, it's really important that it's community-led and community-driven. So my role is, how can I support that work and how can I be an ally, right? I think I told you as we were starting this, or, getting to know each other, I'm very uncomfortable in this kind of setting because I don't feel that I should be the face, the voice, right, of this work. I want to lift up the work of everyone that I luckily get to partner with and support. But it's always just like a weird space. So even like going through my career was always, well, how can I provide, what do I have that I can like add to the combination to hopefully be of help and of service, right?
That's right.
And not like, ta-da, it's me and this is what I do. It was almost like, this is what the work looks like. And is there anything that I have in my skill set or that I bring to the table that can help advance it in any way, shape, or form? And whatever it is, like, I'm down to do it, right? Like, it doesn't matter what it is. Imagining like I was always the person like putting the chairs down at community events, and picking them up, or can I run the grill, or like
you like to play a supportive role.
I'll do whatever you need to be done.
You talked about community level violence prevention, And so that puts me in the sphere of talking about your experience at the Baltimore City Health Department.
Yeah.
You were there for about 7 years.
Yep.
So something must have kept you there for 7 years also. It's a decent amount of time to spend at an organization. So tell us about what your role looked like there and how it evolved, because I know you had I think 2 different positions there.
I
So
did,
let's talk
yeah.
about that.
At the time, I saw an advertisement for the position, which I think the first position that I was in was, I think it was a community liaison.
Mm-hmm.
This was for, as you said, the Baltimore City Health Department, and it was with their Safe Streets program. Safe Streets was the first cure violence replication outside of Chicago. So I kind of did, a little bit of like research on it, checking it out, and I was like, this is really cool. Like, this is everything that I had done, or like the work that I had been doing. I felt like even though my goal was like, how can I support you, youth that's on my caseload if I was a juvenile probation officer, or person, youth that I'm supporting in independent living, right? Like, how can I support you? But everything still had this element of kind of enforcement, right? Like, you're on probation, you violate probation, you're going to go to detention, or you continue to pick up new law charges, there's a chance you're going to go into placement outside of your home, right? So it was always kind of that, if you do these things, cool. If you don't, then something negative is going to happen to you, right? Like, if you engage in negative activities, something negative is going to happen to you.
Very punitive kind of approach. Right?
Yeah, and that's not my bag, right? Like, that's someone just said to me in another situation. We were talking about like kind of doing an inventory of violence prevention programs in a certain place, and we were saying, like, what are the things that you want to know about? And the person said, I want to know if you're more carrot or you're more stick. And I was like, ooh, because I'm totally carrot, right? Like, so, but it was something that just resonated with me. So when I saw the position available for Safe Streets, I was like, I'll do whatever it takes to get this. And I remember the interview being like, listen, I know that I don't have, the level of credibility. I am not from community. I'm also from New York originally. So, I was here for school and stayed, but, I was still, I didn't grow up in a neighborhood in Baltimore.
That's right. That's right.
And so I just said, but I'll do anything, like whatever it takes.
You really
to
wanted
be
that
supportive
position.
of this, because I really think there's value in it. I'll do whatever it takes. And for whatever reason, they were like, sure, let's give you a shot.
You didn't give them a choice.
I kind of didn't. Yeah. And I'm I'm like, honestly, that is probably, in thinking about that now, that was probably the best career decision that I ever made. Like, just being really transparent and being like, I want this job, right? And recognizing I didn't bring everything to the table, right, that made sense for that position. But I really cared about the work, and I really believed in what Baltimore was trying to do, moving in this direction, in this community violence intervention work that at the time was relatively, grassroots organization have always been doing the work, right? Have always had the level of credibility, have always been, trying to connect with folks that they were afraid would get involved in violence, either as a victim or a perpetrator. So it's been going on for forever, right? But like when we think of like the body of work that community violence intervention, or CVI, right, is known as, it was relatively new to the masses.
Right, right.
So it was a really big deal, right? To do it and do it well, and to be a part of the proof that it works, right? So I'd started out by playing like a supporting role where we had community-based organizations that were running Safe Streets sites, so Safe Streets East and Safe Streets Cherry Hill, and specific organizations. So supporting them, whether it be in helping out with the training or the data collection or documentation, or creating a flyer, or putting a chair out for a community event, or going on, attending a march or a vigil if unfortunately violence did occur in one of the target areas. So did that, and then became the director of the initiative at some point over the 7 years. So got to, play a bigger role in supporting the work at the city level. So, what could I do to ensure that there was funding available, to ensure that folks got what they needed to be able to do the work and do the work well. What was the groundwork that we could lay in terms of the proof? Could we ended up being evaluated by Johns Hopkins, Daniel Webster at Johns Hopkins, and his team. So it's like, can we be a part of the evidence showing that this can work if done well? So luckily I got to do that for 7 years, which was great. But then I think it was time to, when you're in the work, you're so close, you're so close to it. If you're at the city level, you might be getting calls, in the middle of the night or pings on your phone or, I can't remember if I had a pager at that time. I know I did in the previous job to that. So who knows?
The price of leadership, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it was like all of us, right? And so when you're in the work and you're constantly thinking about where violence is clustering or this violent event or, listening to your teams be on the front line and like being in situations that are very dangerous, where they are the only folks that can kind of get in where no one else can, where they have that credibility, they have that rapport. But it's overwhelming, right? You're just very hyper focused on the work itself. And I feel like too, with community violence intervention work at the time, and I think this is one of the, I think I try to be really transparent about what I did well and what I didn't do well, right? Because I feel like people need to learn from that,
Yes,
right?
let's
like,
learn.
I think there's some value in like being honest about it. I think towards the end of my my stint in that position, I was so hyper focused on the data because I felt like the only way for this to stick and like for other places in the country to have the benefit of being able to do this work as well, really focus on the data, like just numbers, what, like if there were 2 shootings this year, is it down 50% because there were 4, like just very, very hyper focused on the proof part of it. And I think there needed to be a lot more focus on the people part of it in terms of specifically the staff, right? Like making sure that people who were now continuously being chronically exposed to violence, did they have the support that they needed? Did they have the training that they needed? This was shooting happened at 2 a.m. You might have only been working until 6 p.m. that night, and then they have to like get up and work a violent incident and try to prevent retaliation, right? So I think that it for me, it was like, I feel like I've done a good job in the support for what my skill set is, but someone else needs to take this, to the next level in terms of really thinking about how to support staff in the way that they should be supported. Kind of being able to be in a place where you don't have to fight for the proof anymore, right? Where you don't, like, I felt like I was constantly at the table, like, no,
Right.
this is beneficial, this works, blah, 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 like,
Come with the numbers. Right?
Yeah.
Very, very outcome driven, like, and
Very
singular
outcome-driven.
outcome. Right.
Yeah, very in defensive mode, to be honest. Very like, we have to prove that this works. I feel like I'm constantly defending the work, constantly defending the value of this because it was something different, right? So I get it. But for me, I think it was like somebody else needed to take it and be like, I don't have to be in that mode anymore. Like, we've been evaluated. We've seen reductions in shootings and killings. We know that this works. Like, let us continue to grow and innovate and expand and troubleshoot and all of that. And I think that was my time to be like, okay, everything that I've learned,
Right.
can people benefit from that, right? So that's how I ended up working for Cure Violence Global, which was what Safe Streets was based on, that model. And so now I was able to say, let me tell you all of the things like that I did not do well. And if I had to do it over again, this is what I would do, right? Or if we're thinking about operationalizing the work and you're looking at the data, well, if your main focus is, I need to connect with individuals at the highest level of risk, and then I can say in the background, ooh, let's look at the data and see what are the days and times where violence is occurring, right? What are the underlying factors that might be giving rise to violence, right? What does violence historically look like in this community? And can we do this together? Because I might have the numbers, but you're the expert. You're the expert on your neighborhood. You're the expert on, what's happened historically. So it was more of like, can I use my experiences as a way that might benefit people that were just getting started in the work? And then, nationally, oftentimes the work was run through a health department or through the mayor's office. So I was like, can I talk to the folks that are the me in those, what I had been in those
Mm-hmm.
areas and be like, yeah, let me tell you how difficult this is. And like, let me maybe give you some pointers
Right.
as to like if I could do it all over again.
Sounds like you were able to shift. Data was sort of an outcome thing, and now you're using data to inform proactive actions, inform collaborations, inform how you look at risk and protective factors more broadly than just does something work or it doesn't work. And it
Right.
seems like you had a better time living in that space. But you also did something interesting during that time period. You did your master's
I did.
in that. So what was the thinking behind that? Was it to fill a specific knowledge gap, or was it more like I'm seeing my career going on this trajectory and I need to have a master's to a lot of people feel like they have to have a master's or a higher
Yeah.
level of education to feel respected, feel listened to. What was the thinking behind why you did it at that point?
I think it was a little of both, to be honest. I think because I didn't have the same level of like anxiety and stress, as I was getting a little bit older and getting like a little bit more acclimated to the work. I think it was like maybe now's the right time. I also felt like, now when I graduated from Towson, I was 21.
Mm-hmm.
If you said to me like, what did that education look like? I don't know if I just don't have the best memory, which I think is part of it, but I remember very specific classes, but I don't remember all of the,
Mm-hmm.
the criminological theories and things like that. So I've thought, why don't we do this? Why don't we take it to the next level in terms of career as well? And it was a really cool experience because I don't know if this is like the same thing for everyone, but going back to school as an adult, first off, it's the like only time in your life when you can be competitive. So I was like, oh, would you get on that, right? Like, which is fun.
Yeah.
But it was just also like I was able to connect what I was learning to the actual work that I had either done, was doing, or hopefully wanted to do in the future.
Yep.
And I think that was a really cool space to be in. And it was cool to see individuals that had gone, straight to the master's program from undergrad who had not been in the world of work yet, or like not been in the violence prevention or criminal justice or whatever it was that they were pursuing, and to hear kind of, their thinking and their like, ideas around how to increase this, decrease this, or like what this work could look like. So it was fun to be in that space as well and see folks that were just starting.
Yeah, a good mix.
And to be a little bit further in and be like, oh, this is,
I
how
can
can I
relate to
take
what you
this to
said.
benefit?
Yeah. You said about having had experience in going to school, you're able to experience school in a different way. I think there's something to be said when you have that master's experience. A lot of people are of the belief that it's important to get work experience after your bachelor's so that you can appreciate your master's in a different way. Though people still do it back to back and it works, but
Yeah.
it gives you a different perspective. So I'm glad that you acknowledge that piece. Now I'm looking at the Google map and it says we've arrived at our destination in terms of where you are now, being the Director of Justice Technical Assistance at West Ed. So that's where you are now. You've been there for a little while too, as well.
A little over 3 years.
Three.
Yeah.
So tell me about the West Ed portfolio that you work in and your work specifically.
Yeah.
In terms of violence prevention and things of that nature.
It is so fun to do this work, honestly.
Fun. That's a good
fun.
word to use when you describe a job.
I know, right? And who thought you'd ever that's
Right.
that's kind of rare, right? But it is. It's really fun. Working at West Ed, I think one of the coolest things for me is I get to pursue work that I really care about, right? And that I am deeply invested in, and that I can, again, going back to this idea of like, community violence intervention work specifically in the U.S. right now. It's amazing. It's amazing how far it's come. There are amazing people doing amazing work within community on the front lines. I am not the person to be like, let me go train these violence interrupters. I might have something to add, right? Based on like my experiences, but like, it's not me. So when I'm at West Ed and they're like, well, what kind of work do you want to pursue? In my mind, it's like, again, how can I support the field I don't need to be in competition with everybody that I grew up with, in this field, because they're the right people doing the right work in the right way. But how can I support it? So the portfolio that me and my team currently have, probably what we're most proud of right now, and we're going to talk about the Violence Prevention Navigation Framework, which is pretty much the coolest thing ever. But in terms of like body of work, we have a project where we're supporting all of the grantees that are funded by the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. We support all of their violence prevention and intervention grantees with technical assistance. So we've built out this online learning portal, which is my favorite thing that I've ever created, with the help of my team and other folks in this space. It's an online learning portal. There's tons of resources. There's news. There's a community page that lists every organization that is funded through the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, where they're located, what their project is, right? So then if I'm in Philadelphia and I'm doing community violence intervention and I'm working with an individual who needs workforce development, and that's not something we do as an organization, well, right at my fingertips, I can just put in workforce development, Philadelphia, and every funded project will be there. Now, there'll be some gaps, right? Because not everyone's funded by PCCD,
Right.
but how do we continue to build and grow this network in thinking about prevention, intervention, reentry, and transformation and healing? So we get to, we're very lucky that we're supporting currently, I believe it's somewhere around 360 grantees throughout the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And we do a lot of one-on-one work with organizations, which we lovingly refer to as intensive TA, but I don't think it's such a good name, right? But it's one-on-one, right? Like we work with you one-on-one, and thinking about being at West Ed and the body of work, I didn't want to do TA technical assistance in the traditional ways, which is
Okay.
a checklist, or maybe some resources. Or it might be, again, going back to like this idea of like data being very important in this work. I want to be pushing on data collection and data analysis. I really wanted to be able to work in a way that said, you're a community-based organization, or you are a city department or agency. You may be brand spanking new, right? Like your organization may be less than a year old. You might not have significant funding, historically. What is it that you want, right? Do you want me to make you a flyer for something? Or do you want me to go through all of your documentation and make recommendations around data collection? Or do you want to start talking about, if you're in community violence intervention, like operationalizing the work? Where do you go? When do you go? Why do you go? Right? And then how do you tell the story of the work itself? So it's letting folks, it's kind of like a choose your own adventure.
Yeah.
I don't want
Tailored,
it to be
customized.
prescriptive.
Yeah.
Exactly. So anything that folks want, is what we hope to provide them with. And we've been doing that. I feel like that project is about a little bit over 2 years old. So working with folks that are doing like primary prevention or positive youth development. So it's like arts and sports and recreation, as well as community violence intervention and reentry, right? So it's
Must
just
be a wide
huge
variety of stuff going on in there when I think about
but
it.
it's really fun, and folks that are doing this work are just amazing human beings, and anytime that you get to support what they're doing, and anytime someone says, oh, that's really helpful, I'm like, oh, that's so great. So our Pennsylvania project is probably our largest project. We also have another project that we're working on, we're working with Pennsylvania on, which is a federal award called the Continuum of Care, where it's actually looking at what type of system can you build out to refer youth back to community-based organizations so that that they don't get deeper systems involvement, right?
Okay.
So like almost looking at all of the potential intercepts where you could say, okay, if we get you here, can we connect you back to community instead of going into the system deeper, right? So that's a really fun project, because that's also more of a planning where we get to do the, what does the data tell us, and what do people that are directly impacted tell us, and what do people that have had systems involvement tell us? It's kind of this opportunity to say, if you could build this system, what would you build? Right. And it's kind of a fun way to be thinking about doing this work because, you know, if the way that we're tackling violence or how we've done it historically is the only way, like, that can't be, right? Like, there
Right.
has to be all of these different opportunities for innovation, right? And for, again, learning from your mistakes or tweaking things or
Absolutely.
adapting them, making sure that they fit the local context or the cultural context. But, you know, it's giving people the opportunity to really say, I've been impacted or I've been connected to this or I do work in that space. And if I could dream, build, grow something with the sole intention of making sure that youth get what they need within community, what does it look like? So that's an exciting one to be connected to. And then we work with Local Initiative Support Corporation, LISC, LISC. They partner with us on our Pennsylvania project, and we partner with them. They are a technical assistance provider for a federal award, the Enhancing School
Okay.
Capacity to Address Youth Violence. So we are working with several of those sites that receive that grant funding throughout the
Okay.
country, which again is really interesting because I am a support person on 2 projects that are focused on
Yeah.
restorative practices in schools, which I get to listen to someone that I work with that's a subject matter in that and just be like awed by all of it, you know, and so then see the work in action. And then I work with another group in Atlanta that is doing their community-based organization that is providing mental health services and support within the schools. So get to work on that. So it's like a whole bunch of different
Yeah, you get to
things.
dabble in, and even I like in hearing you talk and I see the passion and excitement in being able to dabble in. So we walked away from like a outcome as a sole focus to now building theories too. Like if we were to do this, and this, what would that look like?
Yeah.
If we were to build this and then build it and then see what happens versus like you have this one thing and you have to keep showing how it provides value and how it has a positive impact. So I really liked hearing how you kind of brought all your experiences together to like more of a blanker canvas to be able to kind of dream about the projects
Yep.
that you think would add value, and then your ideal role and how you describe it about I'm behind the scenes, I support you to do your work, I don't need to be paraded out there and be like the number one expert in the country on camera. So like so
Right.
in a way it gives you both best of both worlds.
Yeah. And I think, you know, when you're in like a technical assistance role or when you're in kind of like this, you know, a couple steps removed role, on the one hand, you're sad, right? Because you think about
Right.
like, I live in Baltimore. I love Baltimore. I've been here since 1996 or in Maryland since 92 and Baltimore since 96. And it's a little bit of a like, oh, I'm not, you know, I'm not as
Yeah,
connected. You know,
that's
I
right.
still have friends that are in the space and they're doing amazing work, but like, I'm
And they
not
can
as
see it a little
connected
bit
to it.
more. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's difficult.
Hmm.
But there's also this, you know, getting this opportunity to be like, well, I can try things and like test them out for you, you know, and see like, does this make sense for you? Like, would this be a good fit? If I create this tool, right, or this resource, will that be helpful to you? You don't have to spend the time and energy spinning your wheels because a lot of times, like, again, we're talking about people in this space, specifically in community violence intervention, but really in violence prevention and intervention as a whole, that have to be hyper focused on providing quality services to individuals that are at whatever level of risk they are, right? Whether that is in the prevention space for kids that might have a little bit of an elevated risk, or for individuals that are providing services to folks that are at highest risk for involvement. A lot of times you have to keep your head down and the blinders on and be in the work, right? Like you don't have that luxury of taking a step back and being like, oh, well, what would make this work
Let's
more
do some
efficient and
systems
effective,
thinking.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like because you're the only one that can do this, right? Like you have this
Right.
skill set that no one else has. You can get where others can't. You know, you're doing one-on-one work with youth and families. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, what are the mistakes that I can make on the on behalf of the field, right? Like what are the things that I can try and that if it is something of value or someone seems something that it's if someone thinks it's of value to them, here you go, you know.
There you go. All right, so let's take a little break and transition over to one of my favorite parts of the podcast, and it's our rapid fire segment. You
That was
ready
so
for
fun.
that?
Yeah, I'm ready.
for that? All right. So, Lori, welcome to our rapid fire segment called Insight Blitz, where I'll ask you questions or read some brief statements, and I'll get your brief responses.
Okay.
Ready?
I think so.
Let's go into it. What's a skill that you learned early in your career that you still use today?
I mean, I think it goes back to being willing to do whatever it takes, right? Like,
It's not about you.
no,
type of-
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when you're younger, it's a more challenging thing to, to kind of separate from that. But now at this point in my life, yeah, like just being willing to show up and say, oh yeah, again, like you want me to fill the napkin dispenser? Cool, no problem. Maybe I can
No
do it with some
egos
flair.
there.
Yeah, like,
Yeah,
maybe
do
I
it
can
some
make it fun.
flair. What's a number, fact, or statistic, or any piece of knowledge that drives home the urgency of violence for you that you would
Yeah.
share with anyone who maybe is a little bit about the work?
Yeah. Probably that gun violence is the number one cause of death for, I believe it's individuals ages 1 to 44. It might even be 49.
1 to 44.
Yeah.
49.
Yeah.
Wow.
And homicide is the leading cause of death for children, for young adults, young men, pregnant women, right?
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's heartbreaking.
that was a couple, and
Yeah.
all equally disturbing. A hot take you have about public health or the work that you do.
I don't think that this is a hot take anymore, but that violence is a public health issue.
We're going to talk a lot about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
I don't know
okay.
how hot it is. It's probably lukewarm at this
For s-
point because
for
I
some
think people
people-
believe it.
Some
Yeah.
people, it's hot. It's a hot take,
That's
though.
true.
I hear what you're saying, but some people push back against that. Lastly, the worst piece of advice you've ever gotten.
The worst piece of advice.
Not the best. I switch it
Yeah.
up on you. The worst.
It's funny, the thing that keeps coming up for me is fake it till you make it, but that's actually really good advice. I do. I think it is really good advice to, especially, yeah. Who has given me bad advice? What was that bad advice? Probably everything will be okay, to be honest, because it isn't always, and that's okay too, right? I like power of positive thinking, right? Like I like manifesting things.
Right.
I like having hope, right? And I think on a big scale, heck yeah, everything's gonna be all right. But I think it's also okay to say everything is currently on fire, whatever that situation is, and let's focus on this. Like I don't have to be like, but everything will be all right in a year, 5
doesn't
years,
have to
10
be-
years.
right,
It doesn't have to
Okay.
be okay. Like I think it's okay that we own that.
Right.
It's
And we
not
can be
all right.
okay with everything not being okay. Okay. A little
Yeah, or at
narrative
least
shift there.
Accepting of it for now with the idea of maybe
Trying
we
to do
can change
something
that.
about it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's a good. I'll steal that one.
Yeah, I hope
So that brings us to the end of our Insight Blitz segment. Hopefully I didn't scare you away and you'll stick with me for the rest of the episode.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fun.
we're doing okay?
Yeah.
All right.
That's really fun.
Awesome. So now let's get into the meat of the subject here.
This show was edited by me, Gordon Thane, with additional editing from LaShawn Benedict. Sound design and mixing by myself and LaShawn Benedict. The original music from The Music Room, composed by Tom Fox, licensed from Johnny Harris. The cover art design for our show by LaShawn Benedict. The Public Health Insight Podcast is produced by PHI Media.
Thank you for listening to the Public Health Insight Podcast, your go-to space for informative conversations, inspiring community action. If you enjoy our podcast, be sure to subscribe and leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. See you in the next one.